Okay, let's get started. Now we are discuss about the Poetics by Aristotle, chapter 24. Kinds of epic poetry, how it differs from tragedy. Again, epic poetry must have a many kinds as tragedy. It must be either simple or complex story of character or one of suffering. Its parts too, with the exception of song and spectacle, must be the same, as it requires peripetties, discoveries, and scenes of suffering just like tragedy. Lastly, the thought and dictions in it must be good in their own way. All these elements appear in Homer first, and he has made due use of them. His two poems are each examples of constructions. The Iliad, a simple story of suffering, the Odyssey. Complex, there is discovery throughout story of character, and they are more than this. Since in dictions and thought too, they surpass all. There is, however, a difference in epic as compared with tragedy in its length and in its meter. As to its length, the limit already suggested with will suffix. It must be possible to the beginning and end of the work to be taken in on view, a condition which will be fulfilled if the poem be shorter than the old epics and about as long as the group of tragedies offer for one hearing in the extension of its length. Epic poetry has a special advantage of which it makes large use. The reason is that in a play, one cannot present an action with a number of parts going on simultaneously. One is limited to the action on the stage and the part played by the actors. However, whereas is epic poetry, the narrative from makes it possible for one to describe a number of simultaneous actions. Simultaneous actions. These, if relevant, about to the sequence of the parts is more inevitable. In an epic, the external facts and events have a more independent value of their own. The epic, being of wider compass, can admit many episodes. Epic and tragedy. The discussion of the epic is continued in this chapter. Aristotle compares epic and tragedy and being and brings out their silent features to a large extent. Epic and tragedy have common features. The special of the epic are so as many as the species of tragedy. The basic of dividing the epic into different kinds is the same as it's in the tragedy. Epic poetry may be like tragedy, simple or complex, or the effects may be predominantly due to characterizations or suffering. The spectacle of must be good. The spectacle of course is excluded from epic poetry. The thought and diction too must be good in their own way. The constituent of the epic are the same as those of tragedy, except that of spectacle and choric song, which are constituent of tragedy alone. Meter and length. In meter of length, an epic poem can be much longer than a tragedy. Tragedy tries as far as possible to confine itself to a single revolution of the sun. Epic has no limit of length. These observations lead to the concept of unity of time, which later critics developed, but it will be noted that Aristotle isn't stating rigid or principle. He is merely making a general observation based on the practice of Greek dramatistic. The rigidity of the rule came with later critics who tries to out Greek and Greeks. Greek the Greeks. In general, the epic's length should also be such that can be taken in at one view. The extension in length enjoyed by the epic gives it certain advantage over tragedy. The epic poet is able to relate happiness which take place simultaneously in different place to different persons. The tragedy confined to be represented on stage continued cannot deal with the different incident at the same time or with several sets of persons. Once again, Aristotle is stating an observation based on the contemporary Greek theater. Subject. Subject increase the length and dignity of the poem. This then is a gain to epic, tending to give it grandeur and also variety of interest and room for episodes of diverse kind. The sameness of incident by the stately in song creates is apt to ruin tragedies on the stage. As for its meter, the heroic has been assigned it from experiences. Were anyone to attempt a narrative poem in one or several of the other meter, the incongruity of the thing would be apparent. The heroic is in fact is the gravest and loftiest of meters, which is that makes it more tolerant than other meters of unfamiliars or rare words and metaphors. That also being a point in which the narrative form of poetry goes beyond all others. The iambic and troch of the other's hand are meters of movement, the one representing that of life and actions. The other dance, still more unnatural would it appear if one were to write an epic in a medley of meters, as Cherryman's did. Hence, it is that no one has ever written a long story in any words but the heroic nature herself, as we have said, teaches us to select the meter appropriate to such a story. Homer admires as he is in every other respect, especially so in this that he alone among epic poetry rightly understand the part to be played by the poet himself in the poem. The poet should say very little in propria persona, as he is no imitator when doing that, whereas the other poet are apparently coming from forward in person and say but little and that only here and there. As imitators, Homer, after a brief preface, brings in forth with a man, a woman, or some others characters. No one of them characterless, but each with distinctive characteristics. The marvelous is certainly required in tragedy. The epic, however, afford more opening for the improbable or irrational. The chief factor in the marvelous, because in it the agents are not visible before one. The scene of the pursuit of Hector would be ridiculous on the stage. The Greek halting instead of pursuing him, and Achilles shaking his head to stop them. But in the poem, the absurdity is overlooked. It was not possible to present actions taking place simultaneously in different places on the stage. Though this is possible, how with a divided stage. Later, this observation was turned into the rigid rule of unity of place. There is nothing to warrant that Aristotle is laying down an unshakable principle. He merely brings out a difference between tragedy as it was practiced in his day and the epic. With he says, furthermore, is not as absurd as what later critics made out of it. The ability to relate incident happinesses simultaneously gives the epic grandeur and richness, as well as a variety of interest. The episode of tragedy have to be treated in brief, while in the case of the epic, these very episodes can be lengthened out. The epic gains in interest as the variety of episode relieves the poem of boredom and dullness. In the matter of meter, too, the epic is different from tragedy. Tragedy admits a variety of meters, but the epic allows only the heroic meters, the hexameters. The hexameter has the advantage of being the gravest, most dignified. In it thus allows the inclusions of rare and strange words. The iambic meter used for tragedy is nearly to ordinary speeches, the hence it has no place for rare words. Aristotle says that nature has established the heroic words for epic purposes. The marvelous. Tragedy requires the marvelous to some extent, but in the epic there is more scope for the marvelous. This is not because it allows more scope for the improbable. The chief factor of the marvelous epic is not enacted in front of our eyes as drama is thus the improbable doesn't seem as so absorbed in an epic. The effect produced by the irrational in epic is powerful, imaginative. According to Aristotle, the irrational of it has to be presented in any poetry. Indeed, special justification. It does against laws of casualty. Therefore, it needs good justification for its presence. Its justification is therein the heightened wonders and admirations which he regard as proper in a special degree to epic poetry. He gives an instant from Homer Iliad, which clearly proves what he wants to say. The scene would indeed seem absurd or ludicrous in a drama being enacted on stage. The marvelous, however, is a cause of pleasures, as is shown by the fact that we all tell a story with addiction, in the belief that we are doing our listener a favor. It is Homer who has chiefly the thought. Other words, the art of telling lies skillfully. The secret of it lies in a fallacy for assuming that if one thing is or becomes, a second is or becomes. Men imagine that if the second is, the first likewise is or becomes, but this is a false inference. Likely impossibility is always preferable to an unconvincing possibility. The story should never be made up of improbable incidents. There should be nothing of the sort in it. If, however, such incidents are unavoidable, they should be outside the piece, like the hero's ignorance in Oedipus of the circumstances of Laius' death, not within like the report of the Parthians came in Electra of the man's leaving to Mysia from Tegia without altering a word on the way in the Mycenae, so that it is ridiculous to say that one's plot would be would been spoiled without them, since it is fundamentally what wrongs to make up such plots if the poet has taken such a poet, however, and once since that the might have put it in a more probable form. He is guilty of absurdity as well as fault in art. Every probable form, every in Odyssey, the impossibilities in the setting ashore are useless, would be clearly intolerable in the hand of an inferior poet, as it is the poet concealed with them his other excellence, the absurdity. Elaborate diction, however, is required only in the places where there is no action and no character or thought to be revealed. Where there is character or thought, on other hand, an overornate diction tends to obscure them. It does not seem absurd at all in the narrative of the epic. However, Aristotle, on the whole, seems unfavorable toward the irrational, except in case where the effect in impressive or so pleasurable, astonishing that the sense of incongruity is affected and the aesthetic scenes is satisfied. The impossibility. Aristotle makes a very short and observant statement. Those acute artistic truth can never be disputed. However, he tells us was a master in the art of telling lies in a convincing manners. The effect of fiction, he tells us, is due to a logic fallacy so employed by the author that the reader or spectator expect without demur events which could possibly happen. It depends on poetic alliance. Perhaps it is with coleridge call suspension of disbelief. It is the representations which has to be conceiving, otherwise even true history event seems incredible. F.R. Lucas offers an interesting explanation as to why we accept the most stupendous things in real life as real, while the same fantastic things on stage, if it is not conceivingly presented at once, seems ridiculous in real life. We know that it has happened. Life is real and we are enthralled by its becoming fantastic. But in drama, knowing it unreal, we need to believe it real before we can enjoy its strangers. It is thus of the utmost importance for our dramatistic to present his incidents conceivingly. The playable matters more than its actual truth. It is futile to present incidents which are historical true and hence possible if in the presentations they are unconceivingly probability are conceiving are convincibility in the criteria of success in part. Okay, do like, shares, and subscribe. Thank you.